Hello everyone. I hope today I'll be able to explain a somewhat mysterious subject called insulin resistance using something that you're very familiar with, and that's a flashlight. We have here an electrical circuit which represents a flashlight. So you probably recognize that we have a light bulb, we have wires, and we have a battery. And I've also put in here this voltometer, which I'll explain in a moment what that's for. So in our little neat explanation of insulin resistance, we can draw an analogy such that the battery is like the pancreas, the wires like the bloodstream, and the light bulb is an insulin sensitive or resistant organ. In other words, the largest insulin sensitive organ in the body is skeletal muscle. And so if you take the light rays coming out from this, this is what we actually can measure, which is the glucose levels. So if we remember back to our flashlight analogy, where we screw in the light bulb, we can develop resistance. In other words, the light bulb socket can develop a little rust. And with time, the rust gets to be a little bit more and more. So that electrical resistance, we can draw analogy to insulin resistance. So what is insulin resistance in our body? Insulin resistance occurs when our muscles become deconditioned, or most commonly through a process called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia means less muscle. Less muscle that occurs usually after the age of 30, when the amount of muscle in our body decreases with time, especially if we don't do strength training. So let's take a look and adjust the resistance of this battery. Now, this light bulb. So if we go down to the bottom, you see the resistance level set at 10. So if I were to slide this to the right, we can increase the resistance from 10 to 20 to, right now I have it at a little over 30. Now, if you look up here, you'll see that the light rays have decreased. So I'm going to go back and do that again. So imagine this is someone now at 10 ohms, they're about 30 years old, and we're going to gradually increase the resistance, and you see that the light rays diminish. Then when it gets to about 30, you can see that they've diminished quite a bit, and we can imagine this is someone who is, say, in their mid-40s. Now, if you noticed, measuring glucose levels, usually people by the time they hit 40 don't have problems with glucose levels. And that's because the pancreas, which is the battery here, has been compensating. So if we set the resistance from 10 to 30, there we go, and during this time of going from 30 to 40 years old, the pancreas has been increasing the amount of insulin put out steadily as the resistance has gone up. So as the resistance goes up, the insulin levels compensate, so that year by year we didn't notice any difference in the glucose levels. The glucose levels, or the brightness of the flashlight, has remained the same. So this goes on, and I can increase the resistance level from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 on. Let's just arbitrarily choose 100. So we'll go up to 100 ohms. Okay, so the pancreas increases its insulin levels, and insulin levels can go up considerably. The pancreas has an enormous reserve, and this is, however, not infinite. At a certain point, the pancreas becomes overworked. It just cannot continue to put out insulin. And what do workers do when they're overworked? Well, they quit. And that's what the pancreas does. the cells that produce insulin, the beta cells, they quit. In fact, they die. So what we notice is that this compensation has its limit. And when that happens, the light begins to diminish. And as I decrease the voltage, as those pancreas cells die, you notice that the light becomes dimmer. As it becomes dimmer, the glucose levels begin to rise. Now, we don't diagnose a problem medically until it gets above 100 milligrams per deciliter, or 5 millimoles per liter if you're measuring it outside of the US. It has to get above that level for a fasting blood sugar for us to make the diagnosis of prediabetes. But as you can see, before this all happened, there was a lot going on. The insulin resistance was going up and the battery was working harder. It was only until the battery became overworked that it could not put out as much voltage right here. You can see the voltage now is very high. The insulin levels are likewise high. Even though it's gone down a little bit, the insulin levels are much, much higher than when we started. And it is a combination of high tissue insulin resistance and high circulating levels of insulin that cause problems. It's not just the high levels of glucose. So, if we want to change this, for example, we want to prevent this from happening, we have to attack the fundamental problems. The fundamental problem began with insulin resistance. If you'd like to learn more about this, I have 2 books out. The first one is called The First Program, which is, you can see the link below. And it tells you how to reduce insulin resistance by preventing sarcopenia. The second book is called The Thin Prediabetic. Even though you may not be thin, it talks about different ways that you can use plants, certain types of plants, to change the system, and in some cases to help the pancreas recover. And in that case, you can recover from diabetes or prediabetes at the fundamental level. Thanks very much for listening today. Have a great day.